And welcome back to the Leeds Lens. It is Scott Worrell speaking, and we're obviously going to be talking about Leeds United transfer news. We've got a number of things to get into today. We're going to be talking another injury blow for Leeds United. So we're talking a bit about Ilia Gruev because he's the one with the injury blow. Some awful stuff going on there, which we're going to talk about. Not in terms of the injury. The injury doesn't seem too bad, but all around in it just seems just ridiculous. And they're also going to talk a bit about Harry Wilson. There's been a new update regarding Harry Wilson as well. So we'll talk a bit about that. We're also going to talk about a West Brom attacking midfielder called Isaac Price, who we've also been linked to by a few sources. So also going to talk about that. There's also a new person on the signing scale as well who we could potentially get, of course, at the top, Oxlade-Chamberlain, whose name is so big, you can hardly see it on a screen. So if you are watching on a mobile phone, I do apologise because, yeah, you probably won't be able to see it. But before we get into all of that, though, if you could help the channel by dropping a like, subscribe, all that good stuff, massively helps the channel and massively helps it boost it in the algorithms to allow people who also like this sort of content to see it. Because let's be honest, if we're being totally honest, people, doing content right now around Leeds United with the international break going on is a bit of a nightmare. So if more than ever, if you could help the channel by dropping a like, subscribe, as I said, it massively helps it, especially in a severe time of need. It's like a drought in the Leeds United sphere right now, in terms of news and in terms of engagement as well. So yeah, if you could help, that would be fantastic. Anyway, let's get into the first story and talk a bit about Ilia Gruev. Naturally as well, obviously, if you are watching live, get your comments in and we'll go through and we'll talk through as we always do. But yeah, Ilia Gruev. So the Bulgarian coach has admitted that Ilia Gruev played at the weekend through problems during... He's had an injury throughout the international break and he's been playing through the injury. And going on this, I'm thinking, looking at it, going, the way he went through it is that they basically said that he wasn't quite there yet with his injury. And there's probably going to be concerns, I think, going forward as well for Ilia Gruev now. This is so annoying to me. This is really, really irritating to me because why on earth? We're too nice sometimes as a football club, I do think. Like, if this was like Man United back under Sir Alex, he wouldn't have been going. I don't want to call him Sir Alex, but you know what I mean? If this was other clubs, these players wouldn't be going to play for their international teams if they were struggling with injury. They'd just pull them out. Leeds United would pull them out. Why on earth Leeds United have not pulled Ilia Gruev out and allowed him to go to the Bulgarian camp to play against Spain in a really fierce game, obviously against Spain as well, a really good side, where he's going to have to do a lot of running. Why we've allowed him to do that when he's holding an injury, when we've got such a deficiency in our midfield route, is really, really frustrating to me. I must admit, it's so annoying because we just don't need this. Like, we've already got Tanaka out, which we're going to talk a bit about. We've already got Ampadu out. We don't have... If one of them drops now and Gruev comes out as well and one of them is not back, we have to rush one of them back. And we've got to play a potentially Stack and Longstaff with a potentially an Aronson in midfield. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So I'm just frustrated with this story, to be honest. I'm just frustrated that we've allowed Gruev to go and play for Bulgaria when I just know other clubs would have said, no, he's not going to Bulgaria. He's holding an injury. He's carrying an injury. We did this with Rodon. Obviously, it was slightly different with Rodon because it was a concussion injury, which means that there's nothing that there's nothing that sort of Wales can do. He can't play. But with Gruev, as I said, he is carrying an injury. And yeah, him allowing to be played while he's got an injury, while we've got such a deficiency in midfield, I just think it's truly ridiculous. And I can't think that Daniel Farke and the Leeds United medical staff are particularly pleased about this. In fact, I would imagine Daniel Farke's probably had a conversation with Gruev, but he's obviously wanting to go play with Bulgaria. So, you know, at times I don't think you can stop it. But for me, as I said, we've got to be stronger as a football club. This is not the priority for Ilia Gruev going and playing for Bulgaria with the greatest respect. Like, I hope Bulgaria do well, fair play to them, whatever, don't really care. But he's employed by Leeds United to play for Leeds United. That has to be his priority, I think. And yeah, to go to international duty with when you've got an injury, it's just ridiculous to me. And really, really frustrating. But that is the news regarding Ilia Gruev. In terms of moving on to Harry Wilson, anyway, the story around Harry Wilson is the Sunday Mirror have said that Leeds United could go back in for Harry Wilson in January. Basically, the situation with Harry Wilson is quite a simple one. He will either sign a new contract now at Fulham, or he will be sold in January, because they're not going to want him to leave in the summer. So to get any sort of value out of Harry Wilson now, he's going to have to obviously be sold in that January transfer window. Now, For me, I think this will probably go down. I think Leeds United will go back in there because again, it was 7 to 10 million was the quoted fee, obviously in the summer. If it gets into January, you'd expect the fee naturally to be lower because he's got less on his contract. You'd be expecting for me around the £5 million mark. And if you can go pick up a Harry Wilson at 28 years old for £5 million, this is one that Leeds United definitely have to explore. And depending where Leeds United are in, and depending on what the sort of the position Leeds United are in terms of injuries and that at that period in time, at that period of time we might have sufficient injuries elsewhere to the point where we've got other priorities. But for me, if it's the current playing squad are in the sort of capacity that they are right now, you've got to go for me and go get Harry Wilson. I think 5 million is not a lot to make up in the summer because obviously because we've spent all our PSR sort of wiggle room, we would have to then be selling to buy in principle. But obviously you can buy first and sell before the July 1st deadline. But yeah, Harry Wilson I think will potentially be an interesting one, and I wouldn't be surprised if Leeds United go back in there for Harry Wilson. There's a few other reports knocking around as well. Nico Riley's again still knocking around. I just can't see that one. I've said it's agent talk. I think it is. I think he's wanting a new deal at Man City. He's for me, with the greatest respect to Leeds, and obviously you guys know I love Leeds United. I think we're probably at a stretch trying to get Nico Riley to the football club. To be honest, I think you'd probably have suitors of clubs who would potentially be in a better sort of standing currently than Leeds United are, which is just the situation that we're in. Hopefully, as I say, we can build to a level where we can attract players like Nico Riley, but I do think at this moment in time, this one sounds unlikely. There's also linked as well, as you can see on the signing scale, to Oxlade-Chamberlain. 32 years old. Obviously, people know all about Oxlade-Chamberlain. I think it was pretty fantastic in that time under Klopp. I remember him scoring that worldie in a 3-0 win in the Champions League against Manchester City when they knocked him out. I think they beat him in the second leg 2-1, if I remember rightly. Was it still a chip shot game? I think it probably was. But yeah, they obviously won 3-0 in that game, and he scored like a thunderous shot. The problem is with Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, though, is he's just always injured. And I think this is the reason that obviously he's been released from Besiktas in Turkey, because he's just not playing regular game time. This is not one I think Leeds United should be going with. As I said, to be honest, of all the free agents, if we had to get one, I'd probably go for Eriksen, obviously with Brownhill now going to Al-Shabaab. But for me, in my personal opinion, I won't go near any of the free agents. I think you could sometimes, the free agents for a reason, and they haven't been picked up for a reason. And yes, Eriksen's got quality, and we've talked about Eriksen on this channel before, and potentially the set-piece quality they could offer. But it's just out of possession. He's just no good out of possession at all at his age that he's at now. I think he's is he 33 now or 34? So you just can't, for me, with Leeds United now, with the way we're sort of going to play in games, we just can't afford to carry a passenger out of possession, which is what unfortunately Eriksen would be at his age. So for me, Eriksen would probably be a no-go in my personal opinion. But yeah, that is the situation regarding Christian Eriksen, regarding sort of. Yeah, Oxlade-Chamberlain as well. Moving on to the next link. Now, this is quite an interesting one, actually. It's a guy called Isaac Price. So he's an attacking midfielder, plays for West Brom. This season started it unbelievably well. I think he's got 3 goals and potentially 1 assist, I think, in the first 4 games. So really good return. Came in January from Belgium. I can't remember, was it Royal Antwerp? I think, maybe not Royal Antwerp. But he came from Belgium in January to West Brom. Did okay last season. I don't think he clocked anything in terms of GA. But then he's come into the team this year and been fantastic. And he's been tearing it up in that division. And I think Leeds United, from all accounts, had a look in the summer at Isaac Price, but now I think there's a bit more developed interest there. There is other clubs interested, like there is in a lot of young talent, because I think he's only 21 years old still. So there's Palace involved, Fulham involved, Brentford involved, Burnley involved, obviously, as well. But this could be an interesting. I think this is not going to be a deal for January, in my opinion. It depends how he obviously progresses. If he's returning nearly won every game up until January, someone in the Premier League will take a punt on him in January. But I would imagine a lot of clubs will sort of scout him for next year at West Brom, see how he gets along over a whole 12 months, and then look to go there in the summer. Because I don't think, even if we were bringing him in January, he's a player that's going to sort of revolutionise our season. I don't think he's like a Harry Wilson that you're going to bring in with that immediate impact. And it might even be one, to be honest, that if we were looking at you bringing in January, if we're struggling, and you think, well, if we go down at least, then we'd have an Isaac Price. I know no one wants to go down, but that I think we're going to have to assess our options in January and sort of see where we're at that moment in time, really. But yeah, Isaac Price, I think, will be a player that's probably playing Premier League football this time next year. Has come onto the scene, really impressed. Not Republic of Ireland, I think, international as well. I think I've seen a clip of him scoring a really nice goal as well. So there's quality there, and he's a player of sort of, I think, of decent pedigree, and I think would be interesting in the setup, but just not quite ready, I think, to sort of embark on a Leeds United Premier League campaign just at the moment. Although he's a number 10 for anyone that is interested, obviously, which is obviously a key position that Leeds United would be looking at. But for me, if it's in January, I'd probably currently just go Hamer, just because of the sort of experience and sort of we know he can deliver at this level. Anyway, that is the situation regarding Isaac Price. Now I want to talk about something completely different and take us a bit back to the transfer window, because I was having, naturally I didn't upload a video yesterday and I was thinking of Leeds United, as we all do constantly, because international football, to be honest, is not the most interesting thing to me in the world, and to be honest, no one really likes it, but regardless of the point, I was thinking over the weekend, and I was looking at sort of our summer window, and I was looking through our business, and I've said this on a couple of streams now. I don't think people are angry at our summer business as a principle. I think they're angry at the players that we've bought. I don't think the people are angry at the players we've bought in as such. I think it's more people are frustrated, obviously, with the players we haven't brought in. And then it got me thinking about something that I remember talking to one of my friends in the summer about, we were talking about Leeds United at that moment in time. And he's probably might be watching the show now. And he was saying to me that sometimes you've got to be a bit ambitious as a football club, not in terms of like, I think maybe ambitious is the wrong word. But what I mean by that is sometimes you've got to take a risk on a player. And sometimes when I look at our business in the summer, which is where I'm trying to wrap around this point, a lot of it is sensible, clever deals. That's what it is. We haven't overpaid anywhere. We haven't sort of, we haven't gone sort of and broke the bank on a player. We haven't sort of done, we haven't been in a sort of a battle for a transfer and beat someone to a transfer, because we've paid the fees we want to. And in the same way, when we're selling players, we've only sold if we get the fees we want to. And we've seen that in past transfer windows when we got good money for Rutter, decent money for Somerville. I think we probably potentially could have got a bit more there, but decent money for Somerville. Obviously, really good money in my opinion for Archie Gray as well. So we have sold really well and we've bought really well in the 49ers. I think the problem we've had slightly this summer is that we're playing a bit cautious in terms of, sometimes you've got to take a risk. And what I mean by that is, so we bidded 22 million. I'll use Diarra as an example, but there could be there was a number of other players in this example. But Diarra, we bidded 22 million for. Clearly a player that Leeds United wanted. Obviously, we'd obviously been probably scouting him all year. He was the first midfielder we went for, him and Siddiqui, who obviously both ended up at Sunderland. We bidded 22 million. They ended up getting the deal over the line for about 28 million pounds. And at the time, I was saying, well, look, they're paying more. They're potentially overpaying for players. We don't want to go there. This is sensible recruitment. However, there is a point in that. And sometimes, if you want the best talent, if you want a certain player, you've got to pay the money to get that player. And sometimes you've got to pay a bit more than the asking price for a player to get the exact player you want. And this is something that this guy I was talking to was saying to me, that sometimes there's a player there that, all right, so for example, Everton, they obviously didn't want to pay the fee for Diblin. And eventually they've paid less anyway, but they've paid probably £40 million, which I imagine when you've listened to reports in Everton, they've probably paid about £5 million more than they were willing to do to get the player. Because potentially in the long run, it'll be worth it to get these players over the line. And I think, as I said, with Leeds United this summer, when I think back to what we've done in the transfer window, I look at it and I wonder if we have just been a bit safe and a bit precautionary and just made sure we're constantly getting good deals. But you can get good deals in a number of ways. You can get a good deal where, on paper, stacked for 17.5 million is brilliant and fantastic and a great deal. You could potentially go through the whole squad, be all at 15 million. These are all really good deals in principle. But as I said, if you want to get this top talent, sometimes you've got to push the boat out. And I think sometimes you've got to potentially don't get as good a deal as you think on paper, in the hope that they're well scouted and they're going to provide for you and get that next value. Because Diarra's a really good season in the Premier League this year for Sunderland, and it could easily ask for over £50 million for him. And he's only at 21 years old, so there is potential for that growth there. And as I said, I know Leeds United were working on a limited budget this summer, but it looks to me like they went, right, well, definitely, Pajau's worth it to pay 32 million for, or whatever. We'll pay that money. I think it was 26 million they were at. And then you look at Muniz and they went, there's 32 million for Muniz, and he's worth that money. And then I think what happened when I think of it is that them players, the 49ers deemed that they were good deals to get the price points we were looking at. They liked the Pajau at 26 million. They liked Muniz at 32 million. Sometimes there's a player that they probably valued at the sort of 25 million pound mark that was potentially ended up going for 32 million that we won't have done because we went, I don't want to spend the extra 7 million. And maybe sometimes you just go, no, we should do that anyway. because that player's worth it. And that doesn't mean you overpay every time, but I think sometimes if this is a perfect player for your team, you just push the boat out a bit more and get them. And because at the end of the day, if for example Sunderland end up with Diarra, which they obviously have, and he's the difference maker that gets them to keep them in the Premier League, does that make him worth it? Because then they get the next year deal and they stay in the Premier League potentially. Obviously, we know, as we've talked about loads on this channel, that in terms of PSL landscape, Sunderland will work in a completely different sort of complexion to Leeds United. But I think it's something to bear in mind. Easy B says, we haven't made one bad signing. I think some fans have a lack of knowledge, RE football. The only reason we have been relegated in the past is because of poor ownership. That's not the case now. Potentially, but you've got to have a good squad on paper as well. You can't just have good ownership to stay in the league. But I know what you're saying. As I said, I think as the most part, people are not bothered about, like, I think people are not angry that we've bought, say, 70 million for Stack. I don't think people are angry that we've paid 15 million for Beal or 10 million for Goodmanson or 15 million for Longstaff or any of the signings really. I don't think people are angry. I think people are frustrated at sort of the lack of pushing out that we've not done to get these top deals over the line, or potentially the lack of other deals that we've done. And I know you've been in the comments before, Easy, and I know you're sort of more positive about the sort of the transfer window right now, and you think the 49ers do a good job, which I think I've seen more and more since obviously the transfer window, because I think the transfer window ends, everyone's really sort of sore about it. When you get promises some of the stuff that sort of Parag said, I think it bigs it up to a level that maybe was never achievable in the first place, which I didn't think he helped himself with. But I think people now, as you said, potentially are getting more realistic, which is that was potentially done to a level what we could have done. But I still think that, as I said, I still sort of stand with what I'm saying beforehand in terms of sometimes could we have got into the Bakwa race? I know he's ended up going to Forest, and you might go, well, yeah, Forest have got European football, and that's absolutely right. They have got European football, and that's something to bear in mind. But on the contrary to that, we can offer him first team football week in, week out. They've got Ndoye, they've got Omari Hutchinson at the time, and now obviously they've got Bakwa. Yeah, and potentially Bakwa will just back himself to get in the team regardless. But Leeds United can go in and go, well, no, we're offering you first team football now, the whole time. And I think you could look at some other deals that we tried to do later, like Buonanotte. Could we have upped that prize package to give to Brighton to get that deal over the line maybe a week before that? And potentially, I don't know, give Buonanotte a bit of a higher fee. I know it works on a loan deal, you're paying his wages, but could we have offered something else in there as a reward for getting to a certain point in terms of his contract? But I'm not sure. But what I just think when I look back, I wonder if we just want every deal to be a really, really good deal and what suits Leeds United to the ground. And sometimes if you want your best deals, you can't get the exact deal that suits you to the ground every single time. But if you're watching live, I'm interested to know what you think sort of this sort of talking point as such. Because I'm not saying I'm right in this, I just think it's something to potentially look at and sort of think, yeah, where are we at with this? And is that sort of where we want to... Is that something that Leeds United have done? Because I think it probably is, if I'm being totally honest. I think that's potentially what has happened. Because I do think there were certain players, like with the Pajau deal. I know we obviously wanted Marseille, but could we have offered him more money to come to Leeds United? Could we have offered Muniz more money to come to Leeds United? I'm not saying that this would have worked. I'm sort of analysing it. Easy said again, people are frustrated because we have sensible owners who have no intention of making poor financial decisions. I like the fact they won't be pressured by fans. Yeah, I think I've heard this. I've heard this a few times mentioned in the live chat now as well, and I think people do I agree. Like, something that sort of worried me under the old ownership, and I don't know if you remember this, Easy, is that when we were appointing a new manager after we sacked Jesse Marsh, and we were going all over the place. Remember, it went from we tried to get Slot, then we tried to get Iriola. They both pied us off. Then we went to get Gerard Struber. And he was obviously in the crowd against, I think it was it Southampton, or he was in the crowd for one of the games we were playing at home. And he was basically going to be announced as the new manager. And there was a massive backlash online about Gerard Struber coming into Leeds United. And eventually, obviously, Revrazani and co. overturned that decision because of fan backlash. And I don't want to do that because... And you're right in saying that we need owners that are going to make sort of the hard choice at times. And if that's selling a player that people like to reinvest it and benefit the club, I think that's something that Leeds United are going to have to do with the financial restrictions that we know and the way PSR limits clubs now. But in the same breath, I think part of this is that, as I said, what they've said about how they're going to sort of splash the cash and that they're going to spend every penny, and that's all true and they have done. But the way they sold it to Leeds United fans, for then Sunderland to go and spend 80 million more in the window, who's almost our direct comparison. And as I said, I know they're in a different financial state to Leeds United are in, but that wasn't aware to fans, and that wasn't made clear before the start of the window that was going to be the case, and that we were going to be in such PSR sort of stringent in comparison to other clubs. So I think that's something that people bear in mind. This ownership leaked the story about Farke possibly being replaced in the summer, then backtracked because of fan reaction. That's an interesting point. I don't think that's completely true though. I think what actually happened with Daniel Farke wasn't that they sort of. I think what they were doing is they were just putting feelers out there to how. I don't think they ever had an actual plan to sack him. I think it was more just feelers out there. If we were to sack him early next season, what would be the fan reaction? As opposed to actually we're going to make a decision right now on fan reaction. But I know what you're saying, Rich. I think they were definitely looking at the sort of fan opinion on Daniel Farke at that moment in time. But I don't think my honest thinking is that I don't think they were ever at that point going, yes, we definitely are. We definitely are considering moving Daniel Farke on. I think it was much more of a sort of like if we're going to sack him early in the season, would this be something that fans have a meltdown over because of the loyalty to obviously the fact that he got us promoted? And I think they probably saw a different reaction to the thought in terms of, because I think there is quite a, I think we, as I said, we've talked about this channel before, there is quite a consensus of Leeds fans in the fan base who are sort of closet Daniel Farke outers, and as soon as we get a bad result, it's bang, bang, bang on sort of Daniel Farke's back. Matt says, I think the strategy to leave it late with attacking signings has backfired massively. Gone are the days of better players becoming available on July the 1st. July the 1st is now the new deadline. To an extent, I think some of the loan deals, like I know I mentioned Buonanotte, but I think with Buonanotte, like he obviously had interest around Europe and stuff like that, and I think the closer we got to the deadline, the more loan deals become available, and I think the more better deals you can sometimes get. Because I think that's something we haven't mentioned when we talked about this in the summer, and when we're talking about it in the summer, the whole narrative around later deals was that players won't go to Leeds United, say at the start of August, but when it's the end of August and they've got nowhere else to go, they'll come to Leeds United, and that was the whole sort of narrative as to why we waited late, was to get better players over the line later on in the window. But something we didn't mention is deals changed later on in the window. So in terms of, but we used Openda as an example. Openda, Leipzig wanted to sell this summer. Everybody knew they wanted to sell. They wanted rid of him. Obviously, he had a fantastic year the year before. Then last summer, he didn't have as good of last season didn't have a good of a year, and they wanted to move him on. And the way that deal worked is, the start of the window, it was sale. It's only a sale. We're only going to sell. Blah blah blah. Later on in the window, they go, we do actually want him off our books, so it's worth it to do an option. An obligation to buy for next summer because we need him off our books so bad. But they wouldn't have took an obligation to buy late on in the window. And I think some of the reason that Leeds United were waiting late on the deal is because we know we didn't have the money. So we were trying to get deals on obligation to buys as opposed to getting deals where we're paying for permanent players right now. And obligation to buys for clubs usually only become available late on the window when they've got no other option. So they've got to go, well, he either stays at the club or we accept an obligation to buy because there isn't a sale there to do. And then they grant the obligation to buy status, and obviously you can get the player of the line. So I think that's what I think that was part of the reason Prague was talking about. It wasn't just convincing players to come late on, and that's easier to do. It was also the fact that obviously it would be convincing clubs to do to get payment plans that would suit Leeds United more. EasyB says, how many fans forecast 4 points from our first 3 games? If you predicted our points over the season, we'll comfortably finish mid-table. I've seen this mentioned, but if you're doing, you can't, for me, use that as a sample size for the whole season. It's just too short. It's like when Robbie Evans said in his interview last week, oh well, we've averaged 2 points at home in sort of this season so far. It's been 2 games, Robbie. It's too short of a sample size. And I'd say the same with you, Easy, as well. 3 games is too short of a sample size. And it's not like these are not. We've played teams that were not. I know Leeds United weren't currently ready for the season. We all know that as well. But Everton, for example, weren't ready for the season. So judging the Everton team that we played, and this is, bear in mind, you can only beat the teams in front of you, but it's not a representation of the rest of the season. So I'm not going Leeds United was a crap win against Everton. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that isn't a fair representation of how they're going to perform for the rest of the season. And I don't think from the 3 games we've had so far, we can really say that that's a fair representation of Leeds United season and how it's going to progress. I agree, though. If we got 4 points from for the next three games for the rest of the season, that'd be fantastic. But I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that's going to happen, if I'm being totally honest. And that's my honest opinion about it. So I get what you're saying, but it's just too short of a sample size. I think we'll have to reassess in sort of November time, or at least when we've played something like 10 games. We have got coming up, off the top of my head, I haven't written this down. We've got Fulham away, Wolves away. Then we've got Bournemouth at home, I think Spurs at home. And then if we got Burnley away, after them next 5, we'll have played 8 games. And we'll have played 5 particularly winnable games for me in the next 5. We'll have had to win a few of them games, in my opinion, to keep the sort of points coming through. Because after that, obviously, when you play easier teams, the worst thing is then you've got to play the harder teams. So we're going to have a good run, I think, and then I think we've got a bad run after that run. But I think after these next 5 games, they're going to be absolutely massive for this Leeds United season, because we're going to need probably at least 2 wins in them 5, and probably at least a draw. So what's 7 points? If you get 7 points from your first sort of, and then add the already 4 points we've got, that'd be 11 points from your first 8 games. That won't be bad going. Although, as I said, I don't think we've had an awful start. I don't think we've quite got the start that Sunderland have, which is obviously then represented later in the sort of year when they've got really hard fixtures. But in the same breath, as I said, I look at our sort of where Leeds United are at now, and I think that them next 5 games, we're going to at least need to get, I think, 2 wins at least. Potentially 3. I think 3 would be fantastic and everyone would start their hands off, but I think at least 2. If we were to get like 1 and a draw, 4 points from the next 5 games, I think a lot of fans would be fearing for the worst at that moment in time. So I think as I said, I think these next few games are massive. I look at the next 3 as well. I think they're big. We've obviously got Fulham away, Wolves away, and Bournemouth at home. When I look at them, I think the Fulham game will be really tricky. I think people underestimate Fulham, but they are a really good team. The only thing I will say about Fulham, and I'll probably do a preview for this game, is that last season they actually very much struggled at home against the promoted teams, the teams that went down. So I think they lost at home to Southampton last year, Fulham. They definitely drew at home 2-2 to Ipswich, and I think they actually did beat Leicester 2-1. But they weren't fantastic results. They actually picked up a lot of their points against the quote-unquote better teams in the league, the teams that finished higher up the league. But they did actually struggle, a bit like Brighton, actually, they struggled against the lower teams. And actually Fulham struggled at home, especially against the lower down teams last year. That was a sort of common theme. So I think we need to go down there and hopefully get something. But they're a good team. They've obviously brought new investments in. Hopefully them investments are going to, like the likes of Chukwueze and Kevin, are not really quite integrated into the lineup yet, and we can get a few of our lads back and get into it. But it's going to be a tricky game, no doubt, because I think Ampadu will probably make it, because it looks like Gruev might be out for the game. But I think after that, after this particular game, I think, yeah, obviously then it's going to be a bit easier, because I think hopefully we'll have Tanaka back. But I don't think Tanaka will make this one. So I think it will they'll get Gruev playing, or Ampadu will come back in. Because they did say, when Ampadu did his injury, of course, they did say, it was after the Everton game, and they did say that he would be back for the international break. We haven't heard on Tanaka, but if you use a few things, the reason I think they'll miss the game is Ampadu was the week before the Tanaka injury, and Ampadu always recovers from injuries really, really fast. He has done every single time he's been injured at Leeds United. I think he came back, what did he do last season? Was it his knee earlier in the year? And he came back like a month earlier than everybody expected, actually playing games. So he recovers really fast. So even though they're both MCLs, potentially Tanaka might even be not back until the Bournemouth game, I think. So we'll have to see. But Tanaka's massive for us, almost more important than Ampadu, in my personal opinion, because he's a profile that nobody else possesses. He's got a skill set in the ability to take the pass and move with the ball that no one else in that team has got. I think he's got the creative vision as well in the sort of number 10 role or /8 role that he's going to play, that again no one else has got. And I don't think Stack really can do that thing. I think he's more of a sort of ball winner, but box to box. I think Tanaka is the only actual sort of like creative midfielder we've got in there, really, with that sort of next level of football IQ that can, as I said, can sort of see them passes between the centre half and the fullback that sort of open up a game. I think he's going to be massive. So it'd be nice to have him back, but I do worry about that. Easy says, Fark is not really that important because the 49ers will get rid of him if our points rates dip below a certain average. 3 games so far have proved the squad's competitiveness. Yeah, they have. Yeah, no, they have. And I think, to be fair, as we've talked about, Leeds United's run has been difficult. I do think the Newcastle game was not a bad point. I'm not quite as convinced in terms of their front line that we couldn't have got a bit more from that game. As I said, I took the point out of it. I just don't think it was potentially as amazing of a point as people thought. It's not bad though. It's not bad. And the Everton win was fantastic because they will be a good team for sure. And obviously the Arsenal game, all right, we got beat by a few more goals than we probably hoped we would have done. But I don't think anyone was expecting us really to go down there and get a result, if I'm being totally honest. So I think it has showed competitiveness, but I think we've also showed in the same breath, I think I would say that we have showed a lack of attacking prowess. I think that's been something for sure. The creation is going to be, if we go down, it will because of the lack of goals we've created, in my opinion, over defensive. Like I think already the stats, if you do want to make stats, look at stats, I think we're 11th for XG conceded, which is not bad at all in division, especially with the games that we've played and the fact we've been drubbed 5-0 in one game. But we've only conceded, as I said, I think 11th most XG, but I think we're like 18th or 17th for XG created, which is a slight concern. So I think, as I said, if we stay up, it'll probably be because of the defence. And on the flip side, I think if we go down, it probably will be the lack of attackers that we've sort of given Daniel Farke. Jack says Craven Cottage is definitely a ground you can get points. Have to take advantage of the run to get the tone. Would be ideal to have points on the board when Sunderland lose players to AFCON. Yeah, no, exactly. And I think for Sunderland, they're in a similar predicament to Leeds United. Obviously, they've had the 2 home games so far that they've won. I actually would rather Leeds United's position currently. I don't know if there are any Sunderland fans watching, but I would actually, if I was a Sunderland fan, with the games that we've played, I would probably swap because I'd take a win over Everton and a draw over Newcastle and a loss at Arsenal over 2 wins and losing at Burnley, because I think Burnley's obviously such a good opportunity for points. So I would actually rather be in Leeds United's position. And I said, I think we've done really well to get the points we have and probably perform the best of all the newly promoted teams, currently, in my personal opinion. But in the same breath, it's nice to have points on the board. And also in the same breath, like, Burnley have gone to Man United away and they've played Spurs away so far, which will be obviously games that Leeds United I think are going to find difficult to pick up points in. I always remember people saying if you're not looking to win games and it's like Fulham, Brentford, etc., then it's going to be a long season. Got to target 3 points. Yeah, no, I agree. I think like especially when we're playing like I think people have said like Bournemouth at home is going to be a tricky game for us. And it will be a tricky game, but in the same breath, obviously, as we know, every single game will be tricky for Leeds United. Every game is tricky is going to be tricky for Leeds United. So Bournemouth at home has got to be a game we've got to try targeting and winning. They're going to probably finish at the best probably 8th, and we're playing them at home. They're games you've got to try win. A draw probably isn't. It won't be the world's worst result, depending on how the results go in the previous 2 games. But you've got to be targeting wins. Mark says draws in previous relegations battle have been pretty meaningless. Pretty meaningless, really. I disagree slightly because you can get, I think, you can have, in a relegation battle for me, you can have decent points. I don't think last year when obviously Leeds were going for promotion, a point's a good result. Like Daniel Farke used to throw this out, didn't he, when we used to get an away point, and he used to be like, every point away from home's good. That was always nonsense, in my opinion. But I do think if you, points, draws are good results. Like you just got to get draws over the line against, like if you can beat quite a few of the teams lower down in the league at home, and then get draws against the likes of Newcastle's and Chelsea's and potentially Arsenal's of the world at home, then I think that's a sort of, that is a formula to stay up. So I slightly disagree there. I think every point in this league is massive. I mean, if you draw every game, you probably stay in the league. Not that the Leeds United are going to do that, but you get the sort of point that I'm going at, because it's always just important to add points to your tally. Like I remember the year Forest stayed up, and they were obviously in the last cohort of teams that did stay up, and they picked up a point at home to Villa, and Roy Keane was discussing it after the game. The point that obviously that they managed to acquire in that game, and he said that that's a massive point, just to not lose and to get something from the game and to come out knowing you've actually achieved something. And that was only Villa at home, which again wasn't an unbelievable result, and that sort of propelled their season then into terms of actually getting points to the line, and obviously they did stay up. So yeah, I think I'm not fully sure on that. I do think points are not bad, but yeah, I get your point in terms of like, when we're playing sort of Bournemouth at home, I think Newcastle at home, as I said, is a completely acceptable point, and I'm not dismissing that at all, and I would have took it before the game kicks off. But when we're playing Bournemouth at home, my personal opinion will be that I probably wouldn't take a draw before the kickoff, because I just think that if you're not going to be beating sort of Bournemouths and even Wolves away to an extent, you're probably going to be struggling. Probably still stay in the division, in my opinion. And I think that's a fair Because like, especially, I know we've got people in the live chat now that I think Easy thinks that we're going to be sort of comfortably mid-table. If we are going to be comfortably mid-table, we're going to have to beat these teams for sure. Jack says, agreed, every point is vital, especially that the threshold for survival these days is lower than it was 10 years ago. Yeah, it has been to an extent, but obviously last year I think it would have been, it depends what you base it on, because obviously I think the bottom team last year was, it was Spurs, wasn't it, that finished 17th last year? Was it Spurs? I think it was, and they got did they get about 40 points? So it depends what metric you look at, because obviously I think Leicester would finished third bottom and they finished on 26 points. So you could look at it and go, last year you only need 27 points to survive. Or last year you could say that you'd needed what Spurs got, which is obviously 38 points. I think it depends. My feeling this year will be it's probably around about the 38 point mark, personally. Mark says, Leicester finished third bottom last season. If you gave me 14 points, if you gave them 14 points, they still wouldn't have stayed up. If you gave Luton 10 draws in 2023, they wouldn't have stayed up without Forest's deduction. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, but as I said, you've got to try get points in games. You're not going to win every game. We've got a Sunderland fan in here. SAFC for life said, I'm a Sunderland fan. It doesn't matter if you have the top two teams in your first 3 games. Everyone's got to play them at sometimes twice. I don't know what the big deal is about. If you had 2 top teams in your first 3 games. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, and I completely agree, obviously everyone's got to play them. I'm just saying that we've obviously played trickier games on paper. Like, no, I don't think anyone thinks that. I'd be surprised if anyone thought that sort of Newcastle at home and Arsenal away and Everton at home was an easier run than Sunderland had. I think Sunderland have had the easiest run of all, quite comfortably. Brentford at home, West Ham at home, and Burnley away. Them fixtures are definitely better than Leeds fixtures. I understand that everyone's got to play them, but they're for me games that you've got to go try win. And obviously Sunderland have done it, and fair play to them. But that is their proper targeting games. Jack says, bit of a strange season last year, to be fair, and the 3 that went down were shocking. The year before, Luton only lost out to Forest. Yeah, no, you're right. Mark says, point is, if you've got to go into these games trying to win, even at 1-1 in the 80th minute, you've got to go for it. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it depends who you're playing. Like, I think the Newcastle game, I think we were right to play the way we did. I do think we were right to play the way we did, and sort of I think we were to play for the draw at sort of the 80th minute was the right thing to do. But I agree, if you're playing Bournemouth at home, I think you've got to go and try win that game. I think you have got to go try win that game. But yeah, Luton had as many opportunities to overtake Forest, they just didn't take them. Yeah, they did. And also, to be honest, like, to get a few wins, like if you win back-to-back games in your relegation battle, it completely changes the complexion. It's like, I don't know if people watch cricket, but in cricket, in a T20 game, if someone hits a 6, the whole dynamic of a game changes. And in a relegation battle, 1 win can make such a huge difference, because teams naturally, because they are at the bottom league, don't often win. Which I know is obviously insane, but we're gonna need 10 wins. That'll be 30 points and 8 draws probably. From 38 games. So you need 20 losses, 10 draws, 8 draws and 10 wins. That is doable. That is 100% doable. So yeah. Anyway, I think we've sort of waffled on for now, and I don't want to go around in circles and make the video just insanely long. So I will wrap it up there. But thanks all for watching, as always. Just one more comment. Easy said, Sunderland fans are taking just the same as last season, and we all know what happened then. Yeah, you're saying that they fell away. They did actually end up getting promoted, obviously, but they did fall away. It's a different squad, though. Easy, it is a different squad, to be fair. I think Sunderland have got a really good chance of staying up. I really think they do. I think they've recruited really well, and I think a lot of Leeds fans are no delusion about that as well. Anyway, thanks all for watching, as always, and yeah, if you could help the channel, especially when the traffic's down, with dropping a like, subscribe, that would be fantastic, because it really gives the boost when I need a boost. So yeah, anyway, thanks all for watching, and I'll see you all later. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.